But I was standing just feet from the first of two explosions at the Boston Marathon bombings. Life went from this really big, high, exciting, a life that I was living that I loved, to being shattered in a matter of seconds. What if we can turn our trauma and use that as fuel to rise up into something new? But the more that I focused on the hatred and the rage and all that stuff, I literally would have setbacks in my own healing. So I started to realize, well, there's something true here. I'm drinking my own poison. Now you're going to have to live it. You're going to have to embody it. And every time you're going to have to keep rising and keep going on your journey. So even if you take the time to write your story, even if it's to yourself and you don't share it, to me, that's an act of rising and thriving. And that's an act of self-love.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Broken Beautiful Me, Stories of Hope, Gratitude, and Resilience. And today I am so honored to have as our guest, Jennifer Kauffman. She is the heart and soul behind the Rise and Thrive movement, a transformative initiative designed to empower individuals to rise from the ashes of trauma and adversity and create lives in which they're not just surviving, but truly thriving. Drawing from her own personal experience of overcoming the 2013 Boston Marathon bombings, Jennifer is deeply passionate about helping others find strength and purpose through pain. She focuses on turning life's most difficult moments into opportunities for growth, healing, and empowerment. Through the Rise and Thrive movement, she encourages individuals to break free from limiting beliefs and teaches them how to harness the power of resilience to create a life they love. Her approach is rooted in love, compassion, and encouragement, and an unwavering belief that anything is possible. Beyond coaching, Jennifer is a best-selling author, an Emmy-winning executive producer of 2 documentaries, and co-creator of the Telly Award-winning Broadway show Dream Big with I knew I was going to mess this up. Her work, and I'm such a big fan, her work continues to inspire individuals worldwide to reclaim their lives, step into their power, and live with confidence, joy, and purpose. Welcome, Jennifer. It's just such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Kelly. It's such a pleasure to be with you today.
So just to get us started for our listeners who may not know a lot about your work and how you came to start this, just tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you here today.
Yeah. So, my career started working in the financial services industry and spent a good chunk of my earlier years working in corporate America. And then I left the corporate world in 2007, started my own business coaching and business consulting firm, helping small businesses. And fast forward, in January and February of 2013, I had taken a sabbatical because my clients and I had record-breaking years the year before. And little did I know that that was going to prepare me for what was going to happen next. Nothing I could ever imagined. But I was standing just feet from the first of two explosions at the Boston Marathon bombings back in 2013. And so life went from this really big, high, exciting, really, a life that I was living that I loved, to being shattered in a matter of seconds. And I silently wish I had died that day. I know what it means to have survivor's guilt, because I never thought I could ever bounce back from that.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it at the time either. And that is a little bit about so today, that horrific experience has turned into so many new things that I never could have even imagined. So there's so many gifts that have come from that horrific experience. And that's really what I would love to chat about today with your listeners, because what if we can turn our trauma and use that as fuel to rise up into something new?
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point. One of the guests that I've interviewed earlier in the season um, she phrased it so well. She said, what if this is not happening to you? What if it's happening for you? And sometimes when we go through trauma or really difficult times, it seems wrong to say, well, it's happening for me. And it's not until we can get some distance from that we see the gifts that we are given, and our responsibility truly to help others through their own difficulties, because we've been afforded this wisdom, although we didn't ask for it. So you used, as a survivor of the Boston Marathon bombing, and I'm so sorry for what you went through. It must have been so traumatic, to witness, and to be a victim of that. But how did you turn that traumatic experience into a catalyst for you for personal growth? So what did you do leading up to that, say, to the point that you were ready to say, okay, now I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to help other people.
Yeah, it was a 4-year journey, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
The first year was all about learning how to rise up from the terror I felt. The experience is beyond what anything words could describe. I'm born and raised in the Boston area. I went to school, both undergrad and grad school. I worked in the city. I never could have imagined something like this could happen. And it did, right? So that was, so for me, what used to be, a safe space no longer was safe for me. So the first year I was pretty much in isolation,
Mm-hmm.
learning how to deal with my own fear and terror. And then year 2 was learning how to rise up from the rage I felt, right?
Yeah.
Because life was really on a good trajectory when all of this happened. And I just didn't understand it. And I can relate to what you said, because in the beginning, I was asking myself, why is this happening to me? Why? I don't understand. And I'm like, I'm a good person. What did I do to deserve this? Which is what I've now come to understand is really victim consciousness, right? Like, why is this happening to me? And all of that. And at the time, before the bombings happened, I was very much into meditation. And I remember it was about 6 months after the bombings happened, I started to slowly return to my meditation group. And I remember my meditation teacher saying to me, someday you're going to see this as a gift. And I remember being so angry at her. I'm like, a gift? Are you for real? Do you even have any idea what I've been through? And I left that night and I'm driving home and I'm sobbing, crying. I'm like, a gift? I don't understand. But I also knew that she was just such a kind-hearted woman that she would
Mm-hmm.
never say anything to hurt me. So I pondered that for months. And then in the pondering of that, all of a sudden something clicked. What if this was happening for me? Huh? And then that took me down a different path. I started to get curious about, well, if this was happening for me, what is there for me to learn? I'm going to tell you a story that will uh, basically give your listeners more context. So I said I was born and raised in the Boston area.
Mm-hmm.
If you've driven in Boston, we cut people off. It's not personal. It's not intentional. It's just how we drive. We're kind of crazy, Bostonians. And we have one-way streets that are very old and we're like trying to get places quickly. So it's just common. And for those of us that live here, we don't get upset about it. It's just something that happens. Well, this one
Yeah.
particular day, this is probably 8 or 9 months into my journey of healing. And I was leaving a support group meeting for the survivors of the bombings. And it happened to be at a local Boston hospital. And so I leave the hospital and somebody cut me off. And I had a response or reaction that I honestly was surprised about. I was outraged. And I started to basically take on road rage. I started chasing the truck that cut me off down the street. I'm beeping the horn. I'm yelling and screaming in the car as if this person could hear me. I'm saying, every profanity in the book. And this particular person made it through the light. But by the time I got to the light had turned red. And obviously I stopped my car. And in that second, I started to cry. Who is this person?
Mm.
And I realized in that moment that a terrorist lived inside of me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, if I don't do something to heal this part of myself, I'm going to be no different than those two young men that placed the bombs that day. And that was a big aha moment for me,
Mm-hmm.
because up until that point, I hated them. I had wished that they, you know, well, one of them had passed away in the pursuit of capturing them, but I had silently had wished, like, what would I do if I encountered these people? And I would have thoughts of killing them. That's not who I am, Kelly. But
Yeah.
but I'm being real. I'm being real. This was what was happening for me. And I was like, if I act out on this, I'm no different than them. And then that helped me to see, wait a minute here. We have a common thread. Now, that was months later, like probably a good year or longer. I had to work through my rage and work through my anger. And what I noticed was every time that I did, my healing got exponentially better. But the more that I focused on the hatred and the rage and all that stuff, I literally would have setbacks in my own healing. So I started to realize, well, there's something true here. I'm drinking my own poison. And
Yeah.
so at the time, forgiveness, you know, I was not open to forgiving them. But I realized, wait a minute, forgiveness is not about them. It's about me setting myself free. So I then went down a journey, basically reading Yvonne Le Van Zant's book about forgiveness. And I started to do the practices in the book. And then I
Mm-hmm.
eventually got myself to a place where I could forgive them. And when I did, it was a turning point in my life. And that forgiveness led to compassion for the two young men. That compassion then led to curiosity, because then I got curious, who does this? And what I learned was these two young men grew up in a war-torn country. Can you imagine being a kid where bombs are being, thrown at, dropped on your home and in your environment? I
Right.
didn't grow up that way. So I was like, I can't even imagine what that's like. And now I'm not justifying what they did in any way,
No.
shape, or form.
No.
But I realized hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And I also realized if I went down that same path, I was going to be no different than them. And I realized there has to be another way. And I learned over time that love was the other way. I had to learn to have compassion and love for myself and
Mm-hmm.
nurture myself during this process. And then that evolved to where I am today.
I mean, that's quite amazing that you were able to step back from your own personal experience and really look at those two men who made who made so many people suffer, and look at them and their own humanity and probably the origins of their belief systems that brought them to that place to enact such violence on a city. That takes incredible strength in terms of forgiveness. One of my favorite quotes about forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And over the years, I read that quote often when I'm trying to work through my own battles with forgiving wrongs from the past. So you took this, you worked through your personal journey of really grief, for what had happened, for the trauma. You worked through that whole forgiveness piece. And I have to say, one question I do have, you said you went to a support group in Boston. I just looked at it from afar, and I just thought, I was just so blown away by how the city responded to what happened. It was incredible, the humanity that Boston presented and showed the world in the face of. They could have behaved much differently, and they would have been justifiably, to justified to do so. Um, so when you went to these support groups, so like the city just must have hugged you and wanted to just help you in any way.
They totally did. And I want to say it wasn't just the city. We would get notes from people from other, states, other countries, literally saying, we're praying for you. I mean, it just brings tears to my eyes now and fills my heart with such love. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like, wow, like, what if we did this all the time? What if we didn't have to have a horrific event like 9/11 or, or the Boston Marathon bombings or the school shootings or any of that to be able to show love for complete strangers? People literally made Afghans for us, and they would present them to us the first year at Christmas. The mayor, at the time it was Mayor Menino, he and his staff were just like, whatever you need, whatever you need. And um, it was really awe-inspiring how the community came together, but actually how the country came together and how people from outside of the country even could, express their love and prayers. It was beyond words.
Hmm. Did you make connections with other survivors that you still maintain today?
It's interesting. So I did for a long time, actually. Um, but there was another pivotal point that happened a few years ago where I just don't relate to the term victim any longer. I
Hmm.
truly view myself as a survivor, and and because I chose to forgive, and because I'm in a completely different place towards those two young men, not everyone's there. And so I felt ostracized by a lot of my fellow survivor group. Um, and I don't judge them. Like, I truly still love and care about them, but the truth is I'm in a different place. And so now I'm taking, I'm taking what I've learned and helping to bring the message out to the world in a new way. I can't be in an environment that wants to continue to perpetuate, that experience. I've moved on from it. It will always be
Hmm.
a part of me, but I want to take that experience and do good in the world. And
Yeah.
that's just kind of where I am now.
So, and I mean, you arrive at that higher vibration with a lot of hard work, I don't know, but for me, I find that once you realize that you can be at that higher vibration, it is work to stay there too.
100%.
It's a very noisy world, and so sometimes you have to, wish people well as they're on their different path. Um, but you have to follow your own journey, and it sounds like that's what you did with this rise and thrive movement. So let's talk, tell me about the rise and thrive movement and how it has evolved since its inception, and what you're so proud of with it.
So I'll give you a little bit of backdrop story here so you can understand how I came to this. So um, it was 3 years into the journey, and I had made tremendous progress in my healing. And I had chosen to go down a path of learning how to heal holistically, which I'm so proud to say I've been able to do. My background
Mhm.
is in business and economics. I have no prior background in wellness and nutrition and health and all that. But this journey took me down a path to learn how to do that naturally, and I'm really proud that I was able to do that. But 30 years into that journey, I was like, I still felt like that experience had a hold on me. And I had been praying and meditating on what's it going to take to come full circle. And at this point, I had gotten to the point where I was able to walk normally again. Um, I was starting to regain my strength, albeit, I was still really weak. And I
Mhm.
hired a personal trainer to work with me to get my strength and endurance back. And I was early into that stage. And I remember going to the gym for my workout session. And he had said, go warm up on the bike for 5 minutes. And I'm sitting on the bike, and I see a woman in front of me running. And on the back of her shirt said, I finished, can you? And what came through to my awareness at that point was, you've got to run the marathon. Now, I was a spectator the day of the bombings. I was not a runner. I've
Okay.
never had a desire to run the marathon. And so long story short is the answer to my prayers was, in order for me to come full circle, I needed to physically run that marathon. And what I didn't know then, which I later learned, by running the marathon, it helped me to also work through some residual trauma that had still been stored in my body, that if I hadn't trained for the marathon,
Mm.
probably would have manifested in some sort of disease later on in life. I had a lot of myofascia issues that, again, never would have, because at the point that I chose to do the marathon, I was pain free. But shortly into the training for the marathon, I started to resume a lot of pain again. And that was another part of my healing journey. But fast forward, the day that I crossed the finish line, it literally was a whole new trajectory. It was literally like closing a chapter of my life and starting a new one. I got invited to write my story with Jack Canfield in a best-selling book. Never could have imagined that. Then that led me to being able to produce two documentaries showcasing post-traumatic stress in veterans. And those went on to win Emmy Awards, something I could have never imagined. And then an opportunity to actually work with Rudy Rudiger, and do a, first ever one-person Broadway show. So we helped bring that to life, called Dream Big. These were things I could have never imagined. So this has been my own journey of rising and thriving. And I'm like, I want to inspire that in others. And, that just happens to be my journey. It doesn't matter what it is for other people. It could be, creating a support group. It could be writing a book. It could be whatever that means. But for me, I want to be able to inspire, encourage, and empower others to do the same. And that's what the movement's about.
That's beautiful. And I love what you're saying about holistic healing. And I myself, I'm a big believer in holistic healing, and I have been on a years-long journey towards my own health. And it's so interesting for me to realize what we hold in our organs and in our body in terms of trauma, and what happens when we finally let it go. It's like, it is like a new chapter of your life. And when it happens, I mean, I remember the first time I had a big breakthrough, and I don't know if you feel the same, but at first time I had a big breakthrough and I let go of something I had been carrying my entire life. And I thought, why did you wait so long, girl? Like, what took you so long? It's an amazing process when you open your mind and your heart to it, isn't it?
It is. And I still have those experiences, Kelly. Like, I'm actually working through another evolution of my own rise and thrive journey. And I'm confronted with fear again. I'm confronted with, can I do this? Like, that whole imposter syndrome stuff comes up. And I'm like,
Oh,
okay, take a deep breath. You've got this, and I still have to be my own best cheerleader, right? Like, you've got this, you can do this, and surrounding yourself with people that believe in you and believe in what you're up to. To me, it's an evolutionary journey. Like, and for me, I don't know, I don't know if God did this on purpose. Like, hey, we want you to do this Rise and Thrive movement as kind of like, because now you're going to have to live it. You're going to have to embody it. And every time you're going to have to keep rising and keep going on your journey. And it keeps me humble. It
yeah.
keeps me grounded. And it keeps me, but also I feel like it keeps me relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. Because don't you feel that, because I started my own thing called Just One Little Thing. And it's about finding one little thing to be grateful for, no matter what is happening in your life, no matter what your circumstances. And I started it in the depths of grief. But people know if you're not walking your talk. They do. They sense it. So you have to make that commitment to be what you're teaching. If you're going to say, okay, rise and thrive, you've got to be a riser and a thriver. And I've got to be a grateful person. Don't you agree?
100%. 100%. And there are days that I can do it gracefully, and other days I'm kicking and screaming, why did I sign up for this? Just be really honest, right? Like I, but I'm human. I'm having a human experience. And I think that's the other thing is to have compassion and gratitude for that. I
Yeah.
can so relate to, being grateful. And, the irony is several years before the bombings took place, I received an award for being grateful. It just was part of what I did. Right. And so, but I did that in times of my life where life was good. It was easy to be grateful. And I
Yeah.
remember when the bombings happened, I stopped doing my gratitude practice because I literally, like, what is there grateful? I have nothing to be grateful for. So I thought. And it took me a while to get back into my gratitude practice because in the beginning I'd sit there and I'd sob. I don't have anything to be grateful for. And it took me a while to be like, wait a minute. What about being grateful for, the fact that you're healing, you're learning how to heal naturally? What about, the fact that complete strangers have sent you love notes and prayers out of nowhere, right? Like, and then, so it took a while, but I started to build that muscle again. And I would say, like, you know, every day I am grateful. I take time most every day. I can't say I'm 100%, but most every day I take time. What am I grateful for today? And I
Mhm.
also added to that, what do I love about myself? What do I love and appreciate about myself? Because the truth is, when the bombings happened, I didn't really love and appreciate myself. Like, I was an overachiever, trying to outrun the trauma from my childhood and all of that. And now this experience has taught me how to be my very best friend and to
Oh,
talk more lovingly to myself and not beat myself up, because something didn't go the way I thought it would go, or I failed at something. Um, it's like, it's okay. Get back up, do it again.
yeah. And we often, we have the best intentions with our practices of gratitude or forgiveness or whatever, but we often are very unaware of that quiet little voice in our mind that is putting, we're putting ourselves down, we're putting our makeup on, saying, "Oh, look at that wrinkle," or, it can be something as simple as that, or something as, "Well, I'm not qualified to do that," or I don't, no one wants to hear my story, or, we tell ourselves these stories internally, and it is you have to pay attention to that little inner voice.
100%. And I believe every person on the planet has experienced trauma of some sort.
Right.
And so therefore everyone has a story. So even if you take the time to write your story, even if it's to yourself and you don't share it, to me, that's an act of rising and thriving. And that's an act of self-love, because now you're actually validating that you matter and that you do have a story, and that, those little steps, that one little step can go a long way.
Absolutely. So tell me, with the Rise and Thrive movement, how do you guide people? Like, I'm just thinking about, like, who shows up for you with that, and how do you guide them from, where their starting point to where they feel like they can really thrive in their life?
So I think, there's a couple of ways. It's really about taking people on an inward journey, because it's not what I have found. It's a very unique experience for each person. What has you thrive, Kelly, is likely different than what has me thrive. So
Mhm.
it's like, so for some people, it's just like, okay, what would be a rise moment for you? Like, what would be an opportunity where you would want to rise in some area of your life? And then also, it's about asking yourself, what does thriving look like to you?
Yeah.
Right? Like, thriving to me is having spaciousness in my day, being able to do what I want and schedule my day the way I want, and that no one's dictating my schedule. Thriving to me is having authentic, rich conversations like you and I are having. We just met, right? Like thriving to me looks all kinds of different ways. Eating healthy foods, enjoying a meal. Thriving can be big, but it can be small. And I just say, start where you're at. I think we have to get out of this, societal norm of comparing and trying to fit ourselves into the proverbial box. We are all uniquely, um, designed. And so even though we can have similarities in what makes us tick and what makes us thrive, the reality is getting close to your heart and seeing what is it that would make me thrive, and starting to take the action steps to put that into place for yourself. No one's going to do it for you.
No.
It's kind of like going to the gym, like, or like, I've got to lose some weight right now. Right. And it's like, well, I wish it would just come off like that. No, I've got to do the work. It's the same thing here. What you've got to be able to take those steps, even if they're small steps.
Hey guys, Kelly here. I wanted to jump in and let you know that you can find out more about my work by visiting my website at kellybuckley.com, or you can find my books on Amazon. Okay, back to the episode. Do you feel, I've talked to a lot of people, and this is what I love about doing this podcast, because you just said it, everybody has a story. And I believe that all those stories, can resonate. We need to share them. We need to be talking about each other's stories. And sharing the wisdom. But, do you find that as you see people go through the process, or maybe even with yourself, that as you start to progress down that road, it's not so much that you're becoming a new person, you're uncovering the person you were always meant to be?
I have come to understand that every single person on the planet is given the ability to thrive. It's part of our natural system. But because of societal norms and conditions and how we were raised, whether that, and it's also ancestral, like what's been passed down, and so we have these limiting beliefs, we have these, how we, live in the world, that got us to where we are. But our natural state is thriving. And so I agree with you, Kelly. It's about remembering that. And it's about peeling back the layers, of trauma, or, whatever, those protective layers that we've built up to keep ourselves safe. Every time we put up a protective layer to be safe, we're actually slowly killing ourselves. That's not thriving.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that through my journey, because I told you I had childhood trauma. I was raised to believe you don't speak about it. You keep that hidden, you keep that buried in the closet. That's how my family has chose to handle it in the past. And, you keep your skeletons buried in the closet, so to speak. Well, what I realized was that didn't work, because I had a series of traumas that happened as a child, then in my mid-20s, then in my 30s, and then I was 42 and the bombings happened. And what I learned was they all had, like, it was like a compound effect. So when the bombings happened, not only literally the night of, the night of the bombings, I was having flashbacks, not just of the bombings. I was starting to have flashbacks of events that happened when I was 11 years old, when I was in my mid-20s. It was like, it was the worst horrific film that was playing in my mind. And I was like, this is awful. It was PTSD to the nth degree. And that's what happens when we don't heal our trauma. The post-traumatic stress just keeps reliving. And we've got to find a way to rise above that. That's why the suicide rates, is particularly amongst veterans, but also people that have had severe trauma, are on the rise, because they don't know how to handle it. And what people are finding is that the medications aren't really working either. It just numbs it. But at some point, you've got to be able to deal with it. You've got to face it. And what I've learned is, I personally don't have children, but anyone that does, I've been told that it's like giving birth. It's not, it can be painful, but you're meant to go through that journey. And when you get to the other side, you literally are reborn to another version of yourself. And you're that much healthier, and you're that much closer to being able to thrive naturally.
Yeah. So you said at the beginning of our chat here, that you did some documentaries and you work with veterans. Tell me about that work.
So we did 2 documentaries, one called A New Leash on Life, and that was showcasing 3 veterans who were on the verge of suicide, and they got paired with service dogs. So it was a nonprofit organization called Canines for Warriors. So we wanted to showcase the amazing work that they were doing. And it was so powerful, because they literally were on the verge of suicide. Some of them had taken medications, but that wasn't working. And once they got paired with a service dog, they literally, their lives were transformed and they were healed. So we did a documentary on that. We ended up winning several Emmy Awards for that. That was not the intent. The intent was just to show the story. The
Yeah.
the second film is about children of the fallen, basically. So anyone that was either disabled or killed in war, being able to give them an education. So the name of the film is Freedom Isn't Free. It's the Folds of Honor story, again, showcasing another nonprofit organization doing amazing work to basically give scholarships to kids of the fallen, so that they could continue on their education and create a life for themselves where they're rising and thriving too. Yeah, so those are the films. And then I actually have a film of my own that I was guided to do. We are actually in the process of relaunching that at the end of this month. So this happens to be the 12th anniversary month of the bombings. And I was like, well, what can I do to create a positive impact? And so we're doing a series called the Rise and Thrive Journey. And I'm working with different collaborators from all over the world, actually, for the next year, and bringing the film to communities where we can watch the film together. And then we'll go on some sort of experience together. In some sessions, we'll do a healing sound bath together. Other things we'll go through like an emotional healing technique. We're going to do all different sorts of things. So that's what we're up to now.
That is so beautiful. And I love that you are pinpointing segments and telling their stories and telling the story of thriving. That is so beautiful. It's hard to believe that it was that long. I remember walking in through the door that day of the bombing and seeing it. It was just, and from a distance, nothing like your experience, but from a distance, just not being able to comprehend that something like that was happening. So for you to be able to kind of circle back is, I think, incredibly strong. Tell me about the holistic approaches that you've used, because I know, like, I use things like acupuncture and breath work, and breath work is super powerful. And I had no idea that breath was actually work, but it is. But it's super powerful in kind of releasing old gunked up trauma that you hold on to. Tell me about what holistic methods you kind of entertain and use.
Yeah, perfect. So let me again tell you a little bit of backstory here, which is when I was a kid, I suffered from anxiety and panic disorder. And I basically, was medicated a good chunk of my teenage and early adult life for that and depression. But I realized that the medication wasn't really working. Again, it was numbing. And so I remember asking my mom for help in my 20s. Can you please help me find a way to get off the medication and find a way to deal with this? Because it was literally affecting my life in a negative way. And in order to, so I basically applied for a program called the CARD program, the Center for Anxiety Related Disorders. You had to be medication free to get in. So I had to go off the medication. And when I got into that program, I was in my 20s. When I got into my program, one of the very first things they did was breath work. I never could have imagined. I tend to be a shallow breather, maybe because of all the stuff I've been through. I kind of like, and so breath is work. It's a workout, but it works. It literally works. So breath work was something I had learned 20 years before this experience. So obviously I continued with that. Meditation is something also I'd learned in that process. So I had been continuing with that. But what was new for me now, acupuncture was new for me. I would have said to you, there's no way I'm sticking my body with needles before this happened. But, acupuncture is how I manage the pain. And I started that within the first month. I did another technique that a friend of mine gifted me the experience called brain integration therapy. And it's a kinesiology based, I'm going to keep it really simple. It's like rewiring the brain to the body. So the neural pathways that go from the brain to all different organs and get the body functioning, because I was so close to the blast, it was like I had frayed neural pathways. And so parts of my body weren't talking optimally to each other. And so it affected my heart. I was 42 when the bombings happened. And one of my holistic practitioners said, your heart is working like someone of an 80-year-old. And I had been fit when this happened. So it was like, getting my body to talk to each other again and to work in harmony. So I did that. I obviously chiropractic care was another one that I did. I also did quite a bit of holistic modalities called the RIM technique, which is where you go in using your own imagination and you reimagine events that were really traumatic for you. And you reimagine, it's almost like you're rewriting the story. The only way I know how to describe it is like you're going into a computer program and you're updating it for a new story. Is the only way. And you get to create what that is. No one's, you're in control. So I picked things that I was in control of, how I wanted it to go. I went as deep as shaman work, drumming. Drumming was huge for me because something actually happened in being part of a drum circle. So I did a whole host of things, and some of which I still continue to this day.
That's wonderful. So tell me what you felt when in the drumming circle. I'm so curious.
So a dear friend of mine who I met in the meditation circle was like, let's go do drumming together. And she was a nurse practitioner. And so she had a lot of experience with trauma. And I'm like, I don't think this is going to work. And she's like, nope, just come. So you don't need any experience. In some drum circles, you don't even need to have the drum. A lot of them provide it. So you imagine sitting in a circle. Okay. You're sitting in a circle with people in many cases, you might not even know. And you each have a drum. And like the first, several minutes, 5-10 minutes, like it sounds like kids drumming, right? It's kind of like all over the place. But then something happens and there's like some rhythm that starts to take shape. And then all of a sudden you're drumming in sync. I don't even know how to describe it. It's an experiential experience, but you're sitting there and you're just like, I can feel my whole body, like every cell in my body is just vibrating because like literally my whole body is into the drumming. And it's just, I, I don't even have the words to describe. Just go try it. It's such an experience. But when you leave there, you just feel like a release, like something for runners or for athletes that, tell you they feel great after a great sweat. It's kind of like that. Only it's just this visceral, like getting movement out through sound.
And I mean, and the power of sound, I didn't quite understand that either. The power that that vibrational sound creates in terms of your healing. But I've read a little bit about drum circles. I was in one years ago, and it did become. There was like all of a sudden there was a synergy and everything was kind of matching up together, and it was beautiful. And you could feel like and I mean, it's such an ancient practice, really. I mean, people have been drumming for a long time and they'll be drumming long after we're gone. Right. But, it is a way of communicating with each other. It's a way of connecting as a group, as a community, as a small community in the group of drumming circle. I think there's so much to be said for that. So talk to me about empowering others. So what do you say to people who come to you and they look at you and everything that you've done since that day, and they want to follow a path? They feel a bit stuck. They don't know where to start. And they come to you and they're saying, what can I do? I don't want to be this way. I don't want to live this way anymore.
I usually ask a question, which is, what's something that you've been longing to do that you haven't done yet? And a lot of times it's something from childhood or young adult, being a young adult, like what's that one thing that you has been nudging you your whole life
Yeah.
that you want to do? And what happens is, for some people, it takes a minute for them to recall what that is. But almost every person I ask that question of, they get this little smile on this face, like this little giddiness, like, well, it's this. And then what usually follows after that, but I can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. And I said, hold on, time out. You don't need to know how to do it, but what's one step you could do in the direction of that? So for example, it could be, well, let me ask you that question, Kelly. Like, what is it? What's something that's really like, nudging at your soul that you've been thinking about doing, but you're like, oh, I just don't have enough time. I've got a lot of stuff going on. What is that?
Um, I think one thing that I would love to do, I've been doing this work for about 15 years, and I started shortly after my son died. And I love what I do. I love connecting with people. I love talking about gratitude during times of struggle, how it's actually gratitude in times of struggle is more important, I think, than gratitude on the sunny days, right?
100%.
I have met people and connected with people all over the world about this conversation. I would love to meet some of them. I would love to get on a plane and travel around. Like there's a couple of people in Ireland. There's a lady in Dubai. I would love to meet them and say, we met in our darkness and now we meet in the light, because we did. Mother to mother, I've met some of the most incredible people. And, for a long time after Stephen died and I started to do this work, I would tell my husband, my life purpose is to write to these mothers in my pajamas. I mean, I'm sitting at my computer in my pajamas, and I said, they write to me from their darkness and I respond to them from mine. And together we figure out a way to get back to the light. Yeah, that would be my dream.
It sounds like you could do this amazing tour and get to really connect with the people that you've so beautifully touched their lives and inspired them through a very challenging part in their life. And you get to travel, and because you could probably do most of your work anywhere in the world, right?
Oh, I could, yeah, anywhere.
Love it.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna be thinking about that after we get off this call.
I already have ideas for you. We could talk offline about it, but I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Like I was getting all, but here's the other thing. I was actually seeing you doing that. That's the beauty of it, right? Like I didn't know what you were going to say. And then as you're talking about it, it's like, I am right there with you. Like, wow, what would that be like? What would those
Yeah.
connections be like? What would that? And I was like, oh, I want to be a fly on the wall. I want to be there for that.
Yeah, and what I find amazing about all of it is that at that time, and I bet you this will resonate with you too, but when you are in so much emotional pain, you don't really give a crap about a lot of stuff, right? Everything just kind of falls away. There's a clarity that comes with pain. And the thing that I am just so incredibly grateful for is some of these conversations were more intimate than I would have with my family.
Mhm.
And they were complete strangers. And it just showed me a piece of humanity that I had not ever seen before. And I was a very private person. I've always been a very private person. And I was just like, lay it all out there. Like, I've got nothing to lose, right? That's how I felt. And it was because I felt that way that I made those connections. And I feel like there's a bigger lesson there that we can learn.
100%. Even to this day, I don't, I don't talk about the experience with my family and closest friends. I just don't, because it's also like and I'm sure you might have felt this way too after your son Stephen had passed away. Like you can't, unless someone else has lost a loved one or lost a child, you can't really relate. Like, I haven't had that experience. I can have compassion and empathy for you, but I honestly don't know what it's like to have that experience. I can only imagine it. And so, at the same token, like in my experience, I'm like, please don't judge me by my experience and what I've gone through. Like, my experience is my experience. It doesn't make it any better than or less than yours. We've all had something that's been deeply soul stirring. And at the same token, I feel we're not meant to share all of those gory details with just anyone, because it could create, at least for me, I don't want people to have PTSD. I don't want anyone to know what that experience was like. And frankly, most of the world already knows it, because it was all televised. So in
Mhm.
every year we relive it. It's awful, actually. It's like, can't we just focus on the good that came from that and not reliving that particular day? And I hope that someday our media will shift and start, and how they do that. The point here is, in veterans, this is what I've seen working with veterans. Veterans often don't like to work with non-veterans, because they're like, you don't even have a clue what we've been through. And it's like, what would it take for us as humanity to break down those barriers, those self-imposed barriers that we create, so that we can rise together? I remember the very first time I was invited to speak in front of veterans. One of the questions I got was, are you a veteran? And the answer obviously was no. It's like, what are you doing here then? You're not one of us. And I remember it was really jolting for me. And I said, I am not a veteran. I absolutely respect you and honor you and thank you for your service. I don't know what it's like to go through what you've been through. But here's what I do know. We share something in common. We share post-traumatic stress
Yeah.
disorder. And I said, you were trained how to deal with bombs. I was not.
Mm.
I was on the opposite end of that, not knowing how to. So I'm coming to you to build a bridge. How can we learn from each other? How can we, rise above this together? And so that's been a slow journey. But what if we did that in all areas of life, right? What if we, the story is important, please don't misunderstand. But what if we even go deeper than that and look at it like we've all experienced trauma?
We
And
have.
how can we love each other through that? And how can we nurture and support and uplift each other through that?
I'm going to tell you a story about my experience with something a little similar. I was getting my pictures taken for the back cover of my book. I hate getting my pictures taken, but anyway, um,
I share that with you.
yeah, I always feel like I have a weird smile. Anyway, so it's I was getting my pictures taken, and the person who was the photographer was wonderful, and we were kind of walking around the city and getting different shots. And he didn't know anything about me, and he didn't know what my book was about or anything. And he asked me a question. He said, "What do you write about anyway?" And I always kind of I paused, because I know it kind of can make people a little uncomfortable. And I said, "Well, my son passed away. I write about finding gratitude in the little things, and that how you can tether yourself to the present moment when you do that, and then you can tether all those little things together and find your way back to the light." And I, lost my son Stephen, and he was quiet for a minute, and I could sense his discomfort. And then he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I just lost my dog." And I remember taking kind of a breath in for a second, because I was like, okay, I lost my child, and for that initial feeling, right? And then I said, "Kelly, he's trying to connect with you, and this is the only way he knows how." So I said, "Tell me about your dog." And we talked for about a half hour as we walked through the city about his dog. And he loved his dog. He didn't have children. He loved his dog like his child. And we connected that day on the same level of grief. And it was probably one of the most beautiful. I have goosebumps just even telling you about it, because it was one of the most beautiful experiences, because I didn't stay in this box that I thought was built for me. I said, everybody's got their crap. Everybody's got their story. Everybody's got their pain. And this is his. And as soon as I said, tell me about it, and he opened up, and the love that he shared. And then he asked me, he was more comfortable then to ask me about the love that I had for Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
That is possible for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be open to that yes, we are different in so many ways. And our society has become so good at talking about how different we are. But on a human level, we have all suffered pain. We have all been brought to our knees. And that's where we need to find that connection back.
100%. And, you know, my mom will tell you that I came out of the womb talking, but I've learned that God gave me one mouth and two ears. And what I've noticed in the, you know, in the particularly in the last probably 5 to 7 years, the more I listen, the more connected I am to the other person who has gone through some traumatic experience. And kind of like what you described, you know, with the gentleman that lost his dog, right? Like being able to listen to the other person's experience, and then something happens. It's actually kind of magical. It's like there's an invisible bridge that gets built, that they feel like they have the courage to ask, what was that like for you? And then, you know, and I feel the world needs that,
Yes,
needs this new level, because I actually feel that's how we will heal. And that's
I do.
how we will, I also feel that that's how we will transform the issues that we find in society, you know, the poverty, the homelessness, the opioid crisis. We will find new, you know, the rising cost of everything. Like, we will find new innovative solutions to everything if we can literally just lean in the way you're describing.
Yeah. And the way to the solutions is never a closed fist. It's always an open hand.
100%.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I could talk to you for a long time.
Likewise.
Okay, so tell me what it was like to work with Rudy. I need to know.
Oh, he is just a big love. Like he's just such a genuine soul, and he really is authentic. He walks his talk. And like, you know, if any of your listeners have not seen the Rudy film, you've got to watch that. Like, if you're not sure where to start and you're looking for inspiration, I mean, I
Uh,
can't remember how many times he applied for Notre Dame. I think it's in the hundreds. However the number is, it's just like he never gave up. He is the epitome of never giving up. It was such an honor and a privilege to meet him and to work with him. And he, honestly, what I loved most about him, he's just like one of us.
yeah.
He's just a human being with an incredible story and an incredible gift to inspire people.
Oh, that's so wonderful. It's one of my favorite movies, mine and my kids. And I can't even think about how many times I've watched it. And every time I cry, I
Mm-hmm.
cry at a certain point. We actually had a chocolate lab that we named Rudy. And when he would walk in the room, we'd be like, Rudy, Rudy, doing the chant. And he was just the greatest. Um, it sounds like I just can't say enough about the beauty that you have created and risen from the ashes. I know that so many people who are listening, so many people that are part of my group are going to get so much inspiration from you, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's just really been a privilege and an honor to be with you today. And what I love is how deep we went in the conversation. For anyone who's listening, none of this was scripted. We consciously, literally just decided to go heart to heart and see where the conversation led us. So that's the beauty of what's possible here. And so just thank you, because I couldn't have done that without you.
Oh, thank you. But before we finish, please tell our listeners how they can find you and your work, so that they can learn more about it and learn how to thrive.
Perfect. There's several ways. You can go to my website, jenniferkauffman.com. I did an event that I was divinely guided to do just before the US election in November. And it's called Harmony of Hearts Live. It's on YouTube. It's just over 8.5 hours of free content, and it's all sound meditation with miracle and divine love frequencies, sacred frequencies. So sound is one of the ways that I love to use to heal. So there's almost 8.5 hours of content of sound meditation and music events. We have a Grammy-nominated opera singer who just will, like, literally make every cell in your body, get God bumps or goosebumps. And so you can go listen to that. On LinkedIn, we are doing a new promotion on the Rise and Thrive journey. We've got a launch coming up on the end of April 30th. That's where you can find out what we're up to. And I would say, just start with where you're at. Just start with where you're at.
Yeah. That's the beautiful lesson to leave this episode with, is start where you're at, because we all have to take that first step.
Yeah, and it is just the first step. Don't compare yourself to Kelly or myself, because this has been a 12-year journey. This did not happen overnight. But I honestly pulled one out of Rudy's book, because I'm a huge Rudy fan too. So it pinched me that I got a chance to work with him after the fact, because I'm a lifelong. And but I would channel my Rudy, never give up, just keep going. And there were days that were brutal, and I'm sure they were for you too.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to just keep taking that one step forward.
That's right. One little thing at a time.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me today on Broken Beautiful Me. I hope you found today's episode inspiring and insightful. Remember, every scar tells a story, and every story has the power to heal. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Your support means the world to me, and it helps spread the message of hope and resilience to more people like us. Don't forget to leave a review and share this podcast with your friends and family. Together, we can create a community of strength and beauty in our brokenness. Until next time, stay strong, stay beautiful, and keep shining.